Hey guys, welcome to a new series that I'm tentatively calling Everybody is Wrong About Everything. And it is just, I get so frustrated when I'm watching or reading some kind of article or review or something, and it's just patently, that is not a phrase, I'm combining two words, patently and blatantly wrong. Now we've got a new word, patently. And in this case, it's about the new Amazon series about Lord of the Rings, but not really about Lord of the Rings, and that's part of the thing. Tolkien. It's about Tolkien. And it's called Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, and everybody hates it already, and it hasn't even come out. And they hate it for reasons that they don't know anything about. Or if they do know about, they're just straight up racist. That's why they hate it. So basically, there's like 5 different reasons why people seem to have a major issue with this show, and they're all just pretty much baseless. There's one good reason to be concerned about the show, and I will get to that at the end. But I'm going to first start off with the fact that I am a huge Tolkien fanatic. Where are they? I don't know. There's so many books on these shelves. I've got them all, and I've read them all. And not just Lord of the Rings. Most people, when they say that they're a Tolkien fan or a Lord of the Rings fan, that means they've watched the movies. That means that they might have even watched not appendices, what are they called on a DVD? Like the special features or whatever, like the documentaries, or they've watched or read The Hobbit. And that's basically it. Most Tolkien fans haven't read the real stuff, the Silmarillion, the books of unfinished tales, the Children of Hurin. There's so much that Tolkien wrote that is beyond and has nothing whatsoever to do with Lord of the Rings. And so most people are coming from a place of ignorance in a multitude of ways, and we'll get into all of those. But I just wanted to give you my bona fides, which is I have read it all, and that doesn't mean that I am a huge fan of everything Tolkien, or necessarily even, this is going to ruffle some feathers, but of his writing style in general. But he was an immensely genius world builder, and you cannot take that from him. And you can't also, well, in his world building, he specifically left some things vague. And so some people have some pretty specific ideas of what they think he may or may not have said about some things, and we'll get into those, but they're wrong. They're just straight up wrong. So let's just drop right into the most controversial one of all, which is some people are PO'd that there are black elves. And they say, Tolkien never said there were black elves. True. Tolkien also never said there were white elves. Tolkien never said anything about anybody. He would spend 3 pages straight describing a landscape, but he wouldn't spend a single paragraph describing a person's face or hair color or shape of eyes or eye color, or he didn't, for most of his characters, he never described any of that. One of the interesting things is, from the Lord of the Rings films, we have it in our heads that Aragorn must have stubble, well, less beard than this, but, kind of a beard or stubble, and that's never written on the page anywhere. We have this idea that Legolas must have this flowing blonde hair that's super long and straight. It doesn't say that in the text. We have these extremely... Hobbits have hairy feet, it says that in the text, so he got that right. But are these hobbits fair-complected, or are they black, or are they, some kind of Middle Eastern-looking color, or are they Asian? He doesn't say any of these things. Now, Tolkien, as a product of his time, in his brain, were they all probably fair-colored? Probably. But he was a product of his time, so, you gotta kind of give him a grain of salt. That's not really the phrase I was looking for, but you kind of gotta, accept that he, from the era that he was born and the era that he lived, he probably wasn't anticipating that, he wasn't thinking of Aragorn as a black guy. Okay? Probably not. Or Galadriel as Asian or something. And none of these things are in this show, by the way. I'm just thinking, outside of the box. the show at least isn't even going even outside of what we've already established as in Peter Jackson's films, for instance. Sure, in Peter Jackson's films there are basically no people of color, but Peter Jackson has gone on the record to say, my bad, if I were to make the movies in this day and age, I might have cast it a little differently. And by the way, the word cast, not casted, and I have a whole video coming up about that. But anyways, so would Tolkien have in his brain thought of all Sylvan elves to look like Legolas, fair-haired and light-skinned? Probably. But that also doesn't make much logical sense when you think about it. If they're out and about, the Numenorians, for instance, which this show is going to deal pretty much almost exclusively, well, not exclusively, but they're going to play a huge part, is a civilization that doesn't exist by the time of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings films, and that's because it has been destroyed. Sorry, spoilers! This show is going to show the rise and the fall of the Kingdom of Numenor, and they probably, in Tolkien's head, were kind of Viking-looking, They probably had red or blonde, hair or something, but it also doesn't make much sense when you consider that Tolkien specifically states that Numenor is basically on the same, it's basically equator. So they would not, why would they have been fair-colored skin? They would not have been white guys. So Tolkien frankly got it wrong. So he never says that they're white-skinned, but he never says what skin color they are. In his brain, they were probably white, but he was probably wrong. Based on his own logic of his own world building, they could not have been. So anyways, my point is about this whole color and race thing and the black dwarf and the black elf and all of this stuff. Come on. If you have a problem with it, you're straight up racist. Get over yourself. It's fine if there are black elves, okay? Tolkien never said there weren't black elves. He also never said there were white elves. He never said anything about it. So, calm down, people. But, beyond that, there are some other issues that people have with this show. One being Galadriel is a young girl and she's got this dagger and she's in chainmail and she's fighting. What's up with this? She's leaping onto cliffs and plunging her dagger in. That's not the Galadriel we know. Well, no, of course it isn't. Your great-grandmother, you probably are looking at her and thinking, surely she never won any tap dancing contests, but your great-grandmother probably did win a tap dancing contest. You look at her 90-year-old body and you think, no, Cate Blanchett was not 90 years old in The Lord of the Rings, but, the equivalent of. The point is, Galadriel is thousands of years younger in this new Amazon show than she was. So, in her younger days, maybe she was a fierce warrior princess. We don't know. Tolkien never said. He didn't say much about the Second Age, which is the age that this takes place in whatsoever. He didn't say much about it. He covered in summary some big things like this kingdom called Numenor arose and it fell. And it was destroyed and it went under the ocean. And, there are some named characters, but it's just all in summary. He never wrote a book about it. There's no dialogue back and forth. There's no, he said, looking longingly at so-and-so. There's none of that. It's not like Lord of the Rings at all. It's just history text. He just wrote it as so-and-so begat so-and-so, and they together founded such and such kingdom, and then there was a war, and then this guy died, and then there was another war, and then it fell. It's not a story, really. It's history text. So we don't know much about anything as far as any of these characters are concerned, and so for all we know, Galadriel was a Xena warrior princess type, and we just have to accept that that's how she is in the show. And then as far as Hobbits, that was another huge thing that people were freaking out about. People who are professed Tolkien fans say, aha, but we know that Hobbits are never mentioned as existing in the Second Age, and they only come into prominence in the Third Age. And by that, I say, I'm trying to think of an analogy super fast, but it's that's like saying, I can't think of an analogy, but that's like saying that the island of Maui could not have existed. Okay, that's a terrible analogy, but you see what I'm trying to say here? Just because something isn't mentioned as having existed doesn't mean that it didn't exist. There certainly were hobbits. They didn't come into... Nobody snapped their fingers and suddenly there were hobbits in the Third Age, which is only like maybe 3,000 or maybe 5,000 years after the Second Age. There was no magical thing that we know of that caused hobbits to come into existence. So surely they evolved, or whatever, surely they were around. And we know that Harfoots, which are the predecessors of hobbits, must have existed in the Second Age. So of course they're there in the Second Age. So people just aren't thinking about this logically. They say, oh, well, since Tolkien never names any hobbits in this history text, that means there weren't any. But no, it's just none of them played any prominence in these specific history books that Tolkien is, what is it called, a pseudofiguria or whatever, where you're writing a fake text as if it's historical text from the past or whatever. Like, that's what Tolkien is doing when he's writing the Silmarillion and the Lost Hills and whatnot, is he's not writing a novel where we're following a character arc and, here's the first and second and third act and those kinds of things. It's not like that at all. It's just quick, brief little summaries of, there was this war, and then there was this war, and then there was a period of peace, and then King so-and-so did this thing, and this leader, did this thing, and then these elves splintered and became known as, and abandoned that previous name, and instead now they're known as such and such race and such race. That's what it is. It's just a super high overview of history. And so just because hobbits were never mentioned in this history doesn't mean they did not exist. That's insane thinking. That doesn't follow logic whatsoever. Now I will, and I'm sure there are other things. One other thing that I wanted to talk about is as far as like the issue that people have with that black elf in the trailer. It's just like, that feels exactly the same to me as when they cast for the Harry Potter Cursed Child stage play. They cast this girl for the Hermione character as black, and people are like, what? No, because she was played by Emma Watson in the movies, and Emma Watson isn't black? Yeah, so what? That's just one actor's depiction of Hermione, and we all have in our head, for whatever reason, that Hermione must have been specified to be white in the text, but no, you read through all 7 Harry Potter books, J.K. Rowling never once mentions her skin color, so she could have been any color. It doesn't... There was nothing in the books that said she was white. We just assumed she was for some reason. So anyways, people's freak out like that. And also, oh my gosh, in the Hunger Games, when they cast the character of Rue as a black girl, people were like flipping out, like, I didn't imagine that Rue was black. And it's like, well, frankly, neither did I. But now that I'm thinking about it logically, of course the character is black, even though Suzanne Collins, was that the author's name, never specified her skin color. It's logical that she would have been black. So, I don't know. I don't think these people are racist. They're just dealing with some internal stuff, that they gotta work through if it freaks them out that there's a black elf. But anyways, the one thing about the show that does have me a little anxious is I was under the impression, well, here's what I was under the impression of, and it's been a whole journey. When the show was first announced, I was under the impression that they only had the rights to do a TV show of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and any text in there. Now, for those of you who've only seen the Lord of the Rings movies, it might be confusing to you to know that at the end of the Lord of the Rings, there's a ton of appendices, which is tens and tens and tens, hundreds maybe, of pages of stuff about everything under the sun, all the details about how hobbits came to exist and what their lineage is, and all kinds of details about the Second Age, Sauron, how he came into power, and that's all Second Age stuff. So, because the show had the rights to the appendices to the Lord of the Rings, they sort of kind of almost had the rights to the Silmarillion, but definitely didn't. So anything mentioned in the appendices is fair game. Anything not in the appendices, but only exists in the Silmarillion, is off limits. And that's how I originally understood the rules and regulations. And then it might confuse you to think like, well, why do they have the rights to Lord of the Rings if there's already the movies? And doesn't Warner Brothers own, or New Line, who now owns Warner Brothers, own, or vice versa, own the rights? And TV and movie are two totally separate deals. So Warner Brothers, New Line owns the movie rights, Amazon owns the TV rights. Two separate things. And now, suddenly, up for grabs are the gaming rights, which is... anyways, that's a whole different kettle of fish. But the point that I want to get onto here is that was my understanding. But then I read this article before the trailer came out that was like, oh, by the way, actually... Because also very much confused us why in one of the images they were showing the two trees on the island of Valinor, which before the sun and moon came to exist... Instead, the world was lit by these two trees, a golden tree and a silver tree, golden for day, silver for night. And so in one of these images, we see the two trees, and I'm like, but that's a first age thing, and the appendices definitely don't cover the two trees, so maybe they do own the rights to the Silmarillion, in which case they can tell all kinds of amazing stories. And I read an article, I swear to God, that said they did have the rights to the Silmarillion, and so I danced around the house practically and was telling my partner, oh, I'm so excited. They do have the rights to the Silmarillion, and they're going to be able to do all the really cool stories about like Beren and Luthien and Turambar and all these fun stories about, the Silmarils. Oh my gosh. But obviously I should have known, no, they're focusing on the rings and the creation of the rings. So that's all first age stuff, not second age stuff. So anyways, the point is, sorry, major geeking out right now. But anyways, the point is, that article was apparently wrong because now the showrunners have come forward and said, no. We only have the rights to, as we always have said, and you all already knew, just to basically the appendices of The Lord of the Rings. So that's got me worried. Because there's not much juice in there. There's basic world building, like there's this kingdom called Numenor. It came into existence, and then it was destroyed because of their hubris. But that's pretty much it. And also the forging of the rings. And sure, this whole show's purpose is going to be Sauron, back when he seems like he was a good guy, tricking people because he was really beautiful and very sly, and he was going to be able to trick everybody into doing what he wanted. And so he tricks them into making these rings, but what they don't know is he's got the... it's hard to explain, but he's got the one ring which then controls all the rest of the rings, and so then he's able to take everybody over, and so that will be fun. And I guess if that's all the show is, that's fine, that's a show, but I wanted all the other stories. So who knows, maybe the show will go really well, and then we'll get the rights sold to make the Silmarillion into a show too. So anyways, the whole long-winded version of this video, which, geez Louise, is going on for far too long, is to say everybody was wrong, but they're also kind of right to be a little worried, because I kind of don't know how you can do a whole 5-season show, and that's their projection. They want to do a 5-season show about the forging of the rings. But we'll see. It'll be interesting, and I'm here for it, so I just want to say that everybody is wrong. That's all I like to do. So see you guys for the next video of goodness only knows what. I know that over on my Patreon, I mentioned in this video, I'm going to make a silly little video about grammar stuff that drives me nuts, and especially the word casted, which I hate with every ounce of my soul because it is just straight up wrong. But anyways, see you guys for that one. Bye, guys.